ILA cuts across government, scholarship, business, and brings all these together. So for somebody who really wants to look at the practice of leadership from a global and interdisciplinary perspective, then this is the home for them.
When we come here, we don't hear ordinary research or ordinary ideas. We hear big ideas. We are presented with ideas that will make a difference in the world.
ILA for us is a really important pipeline of thinking and thought, ideas and good practice that we can then bring into the work that we do with our clients. So having that connection with the ILA is
This is the place that you're going to come and you're going to meet the people who read your work on leadership. They're going to read your books, they're going to read your articles, and they're going to get what, this is your audience.
I like coming here, seeing people from other countries, other cultural perspectives, and then trying to figure out how to then modify my own views so that I can be more effective.
Not only do I get very good professional and academic connections, but also a lot of knowledge that I can take back and share.
My influence comes from the fact that my primary objective is always to develop, energize, or liberate the leadership potential in others.
Don't know of another organization focusing on leadership through interdisciplinary lens that brings all of these disciplines together to focus on how do we change the world to make it better for all people.
Good morning. It's great to have you back for day 2 of our 20th Global Conference. And as you see, we just had kind of a quick recap of the last 20 years. Isn't it amazing how fast 20 years can go? I'm here to share with you just a little bit about where we were, where we are, and where we're going. And as you know from much of the work that's been done, ILA really values rigor and relevance at the nexus, right? At this intersection of theory and practice. And James McGregor Burns, one of our founders who you saw in the video, highly valued working at this intersection of theory and practice. It's hard work, but it's important work because he really believed that theory guides practice, right? And that practice informs theory. And at the ILA, we are committed to strengthening the ties between those who research and teach leadership, and those who teach leadership and develop leaders, and those who engage in the informed practice of leadership. But why is this important? And it really goes back to the question of how did the ILA become the ILA? Or what's the DNA of the ILA? And it started in the vision that our founders had. Jim Burns, along with our co-founding mothers, Lorraine Matuzak and Georgia Sorensen, that they believed in bringing together those who were studying leadership for many different disciplines, first to meet each other, to share ideas, and to write together. And from that inception in the 1990s, there was a subsequent meeting called the Meeting of the Minds that Barbara Kellerman led, where people came together, about 100 individuals. We went from 35 to 100 individuals who were those who were researching leadership and those who were practicing leadership. So at this nexus, right, at this important nexus of work that we do. So we've always been about this. And what we do is we make connections. It's amazing. You will find that you will connect with people who you never thought you would connect with. I had somebody who just shared with me and said, I come to the ILA because I get to meet the world. I had another person who came to me because we're talking about sharing ideas that are different, that are far-reaching, that are breakthrough thinking. And that person, as I walk over here, said, I come here because you expand my paradigm, or you help me to think about something differently. So making these connections between people, between ideas, and the networks, and connecting networks to networks. And that's what we have in this room today, is this network of people who have innovative ideas, are doing breakthrough research, are doing phenomenal teaching, and also are working on best practices. So you're meeting each other. And if I had the time, I would introduce each and every one of you. But I don't have that, but I am going to ask colleagues to come up here who represent all of us. So Catherine, if you would lead the crew. Now, as we were doing this is leadership process in work. So we're sitting here and we had to practice this. Now see how good they do. And with that, a number of suggestions came from the stage saying, no, Sim, we got to do this a different way, right? This isn't working. And a few of them had different ways. This is what happens when you get all leaders together. But where did the innovative idea come from to help this, right? It did get better, was from right down there. From nobody up here, but somebody down there who saw the whole picture and could help us with the refinement. So what you have here are 17 colleagues who really represent all of us, right? This is the mapping of the ILA. And I just want to share with you just a little bit, a number of folks, right? So you met Catherine Tyler Scott yesterday. She's our present board chair. Other two individuals involved with our board governance is Gama Perucci, who is originally from Brazil and now is in the States. Gama was our first board chair, and he took us from that transition time to being an independent association. And then Catherine, in her present role, really helped the board to go from being an advisory board to a fiduciary board. And then we have Mike Hardy, who is our future. He takes over his board role in January. Now, Mike, when you're talking, he's from the United Kingdom, but he will tell you that he's really a global citizen because Mike has lived and worked in 6 totally different regions of the world, and now is back in the UK. All right, so you have your board governance. You also then have our member communities, right? Those points of interest, those entry points, those places where you're welcomed. It's also where you explore mutual interests in leadership. So Joanne Barnes, who is our Women and Leadership Affinity Group Chair, and Renee Green, who is the chair of the Leadership Development MIG. And as you all know, MIG is an acronym for a member interest group. And then we have Kathy Allen, who is of our newest member community on co-convener of leadership and sustainability. Right. Then we know that the board and the member communities and all of the membership, you need to have really good staff to work with an association like the ILA. And we are really proud and very fortunate to have a phenomenal staff. Shelley Wilsey, who many of you see and know and see the things in the, that she writes, right? Shelley's been with us since the inception of the ILA, all right? Shelley and I have worked together from the very beginning. And our newest member of the staff, who you don't see on emails as much, Yinka Gardner, because she is our business manager. All right, so a lot of the infrastructure and the work. Of course, she has an undergraduate degree in business, but she's also working on her master's in leadership. So we know that the infrastructure and the bones, if you will, of the association, but the important part are all of the members. And as you all know, we truly do work across disciplines and sectors. But our real start originated in bringing together scholars from different disciplines. So we have a couple of our luminaries here, all right? Gil Hickman, I didn't say seasoned, I didn't say old, I said luminary, because that's the truth, right, Jean? Right. So Gil Hickman is one of our Lifetime Achievement Award recipients and has worked with us from the very beginning. And Jean Lippman-Blumen is another one of our luminaries who has done some phenomenal work in connective leadership. Gil works in the public leadership arena, right? Both very different, but they cross over in terms of discipline and in teaching. Then, like many of you, you're doing the research of the present and the future. And so we have Vivek Chanu, who goes by V, thankfully, who is from Florida State University. And he's at the intersection of student affairs work and leadership education. And he has published in both the student development and the leadership development area. Next to him is Nathan Eva, who is an assistant professor from the University of Monash in Australia, from the business school. And Nathan is a person who won the EFMD Emerald Doctoral Dissertation Award, which is a phenomenal award, and also continues to get high praises and Dean's Excellence Awards for his teaching. So you have in Nathan and in V, folks who cross sectors, cross disciplines, both do great research and teaching. But we know also that our association is about the teaching, and it's about the study, and it's also about the practice. But we also know that people don't fit in nice little boxes in the ILA. And so we have John Heiser, who is the CEO of an international health company called LabVantage Solutions. Prior to that, he was the COO and president of a large international manufacturing company. But he also has, in addition to his undergraduate degree, a law degree and his PhD in leadership. and he blends his leadership and his business together. Now we have the flip in Michael Ciccolese. Michael has an undergraduate degree from his country of origin in Nigeria, and then he has an MBA, a JD, and a PhD from various universities in the States. And prior to his present role in education as an assistant professor at Xavier University, he practiced law, and he was in business working for a Fortune 100 company, Procter & Gamble, in their finance area. Right? So you can see we don't fit in boxes. None of us fit in these little boxes that sometimes we try to put each other in, but it doesn't work. And Juana Bordas is another grand example of that. Juana has worked with us for many years. Juana is a leadership development coach and consultant. She is an author, she's an activist, and she is doing amazing work with our Latinx leadership development areas. So Juana is another one. Now, the ILA is all about creating this trusted space where we can come together, right? And we do this in a number of ways. But we also have to do this in creating a welcoming space, especially for our first-time members, right? So first-time attendee, Tanika Wolfers, who is from South Africa. This is her first global conference. But I met her virtually online, because she's also an author, and then we also met at the South Africa, at the University of Pretoria, as we did a regional conference in South Africa. So we're very pleased to have you here. Omar Badenwood, I'm just as pleased to announce Omar and to welcome you. But I don't really need to welcome you to Omar. He's been to 7 global conferences. He is the head of the educational department in Saudi Arabia at the King Abdulaziz University. But the thing about Omar is that he brings with him more people every year. So we have deans of students and other professors from other Saudi Arabia universities who are here, and somehow you can connect them back to Omar. So thank you, Omar, for being here and for all of this. No, you gotta stay here. Okay, now you have to stay here. Okay, now. I didn't do this one very well. We have with us individuals who have been here for 1 year. We have individuals all over who have been here from 2 conferences up to 19 global conferences, right? But we have some individuals here on the stage who have been at all 20 global conferences. Right? So what I want you to do is to acknowledge with me, and all I have are these nice little pins that have little diamonds around them. You know, we could have done you've got stars, or we could do stars, we can do diamonds, we could do a pen that had 20 on it. But we're so much about putting thoughts into writing and pen to paper that I thought it would be nice if we just gave you a small momentum. So Gama Perucci for 20 years. Kathy Allen for 20 years. Shelley Wilsey for 20 years. And Jean Lippman-Blumen for 20 years. Thank you all for helping me out. I shared with you for 20 years that the ILA is this trusted space for those of us and all of us who are like each other but are also different from each other to come together. For 20 years, the ILA has held 20 global conferences, but we've had 15 regional and topical conferences. We've done 95 webinars, 23 published books, plus journals, interviews, videos, which is amazing in 20 years. But what is phenomenal are the thousands of connections and relationships that happen at these conferences. And that is priceless. Because it's through those connections that we really truly do share ideas and we're innovative and creative together. 20 years of changes in the world, 20 years of growth of leadership theory and teaching, 20 years of leadership development and practice, 20 years of the ILA. It's important in this globalizing world of ours, which is precarious and precious, that we continue to do this work together. So I want you to imagine, if you think about what we've done, if we really truly do that multiplier effect of what we can do in the future together. Because you are all a part of the founding story and the future of the ILA. Our past, our present, and our future is embedded in each and every one of you. So yes, it's a happy 20th anniversary, but even more important is what we do together in the next 20 years. That is important. So thank you all. So now we have the great honor of honoring Joanne Chula. Yesterday, we honored Keith Grint with the Lifetime Achievement Award. And now, with Gil Hickman, Joanne, would you please join us on the stage?
Good morning. This is such a joy for me. Joanne and I have been colleagues and friends for more than 26 years. Because Joanne was the first faculty member hired at the Jepson School of Leadership Studies, she served on all our faculty search committees, including mine. So she likes to say, I hired Gil. Currently, Joanne Chula is a professor of leadership ethics and academic director of the Institute for Ethical Leadership at Rutgers Business School. Joanne is nationally and internationally known for her work designing and developing the field of leadership ethics. I like to say that she was the intellectual pioneer of leadership ethics, and was one of the founding members of faculty at Jepson School of Leadership Studies at the University of Richmond. Like many Jepson faculty, she literally had to write the textbooks used in her courses, and her book, Ethics, The Heart of Leadership, became a go-to for leadership classes everywhere. In addition to publishing 7 books and more than 150 articles, Joanne is an award-winning teacher known for both her rigor and her creativity in the classroom. She has led the field in numerous ways, serving as president of both the International Society for Business, Economics, and Ethics and the Society for Business Ethics, where she was recently honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award. She edits the New Horizons in Leadership Studies series published by Edgar Elgar, the largest collection of books in leadership studies grounded in the liberal arts. Following this plenary, Joanne will be featured on an invited panel with Ron Riggio, prior Legacy Committee Chair, Crystal Hoyt, prior ILA Scholarship Committee Chair, and Donna Latkin, our Thursday keynote, titled A Conversation with Joanne B. Chula, Ethics and Leadership in a World Where Both Seem Scarce. I am delighted that Joanne will receive the Lifetime Achievement Award an honor she truly deserves.
So, Joanne, on behalf of the ILA Board of Directors, the Legacy Committee, it is our honor to induct you into the ILA Hall of Fame as a luminary with the Lifetime Achievement Award.
Well, it's hard to know what to say in a case like this. I have a lot of things to be grateful for. I think when you win a Lifetime Achievement Award, the first thing you have to be grateful for is not winning it posthumously. So I'm pretty happy about that. And all of the people who have helped me along the way in leadership studies are very important. Certainly, I want to thank the ILA for this award. I want to thank all of the members of the committee. That was Gil Hickman, Ron Riggio, and David Collinson for the award. I'm delighted to be getting this the same year that Keith Grint is getting it. I think his scholarship is wonderful too. And certainly I've been happy for all of the people that I've had the honor of knowing in leadership studies. My good friend James McGregor Burns, a man with whom I did nothing but argue with for about 20 years. He once tried to give me career advice, and I thought it was so awful that I rejected it all. But the intellectual give and take with people like Burns, Warren Bennis, and a number of other scholars who unfortunately have passed has been incredible. I also want to thank all of my colleagues at the Jepson School of Leadership Studies. Designing the Jepson School was one of the most exciting adventures in my life. It's not often that people say, we have $20 million and will you 4 people design this school? Hiring all the people like Gil and certainly all of the younger faculty who've come in have been wonderful, and seeing that institution develop has been a total honor. So I want to thank all of you, the ILA, for this great honor, and I will display it proudly in my new adventure, which is developing an Institute for Ethical Leadership at Rutgers. So thank you all.
Good morning. My name is Crystal Hoyt. I'm a professor and Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at the Jepson School of Leadership Studies. Each year, the Jepson School of Leadership Studies presents the Frederick M. Jablin Doctoral Dissertation Award for an outstanding recent dissertation in the field of leadership studies. The award is given in honor of and to celebrate the memory of our late and former colleague and friend, Professor Fred Jablin. This year's award is presented to Dr. Nicole Ferry. Dr. Ferry received her doctorate in cultural studies and social thought and education from Washington State University earlier this year. The title of her dissertation is There's a Leader in You, a critical mapping of leadership discourse in the American University. Dr. Ferry's dissertation, based on multi-method qualitative research, is a critical interrogation of how discourse around leadership in American university often advances masculinist, white, heteronormative theories of leadership, while undermining the democratic, equitable, and socially just aims of that higher education seeks to cultivate. Dr. Ferry's dissertation is a welcome challenge to all of us engaged in leadership studies to be more reflective, self-critical, and alert to the dangers and pitfalls of leadership talk. We welcome all conference attendees to attend a presentation by Dr. Ferry on her work, followed by comments by my Jepson colleague, Dr. Thad Williamson, and open discussion with the audience today at noon in room 1B of the Convention Center. So on behalf of the Jepson School of Leadership Studies, I would like to congratulate Dr. Nicole Ferry for her outstanding work and present her with the Frederick M. Jablin Doctoral Dissertation Award, as well as a cash prize of $1,000. Congratulations, Dr. Ferry.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Martineau. I'm from the Center for Creative Leadership, and I'm honored to present the Kenneth E. Clark Student Research Award on behalf of the Center. Let me tell you a little bit about the person that this award is named for. After a 40-year career at top-tier universities in 3 branches of the U.S. military and serving in leadership roles at numerous professional organizations, Dr. Ken Clark was our president at CCL from 1981 to 1985. It flourished under his leadership and produced such landmark research such as The Lessons of Experience and Breaking the Glass Ceiling. When he retired and became the Smith Richardson Senior Scientist, which is a lifetime appointment, one of the retirement gifts from our staff included a 12-foot long, 3-inch diameter wooden pole with the inscription, "For Kenneth Clark, a leader who routinely solves problems that other people wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole." After his retirement, we created this award to recognize unpublished student papers on leadership or leadership development. We began co-sponsoring the award with ILA in 2010, which is wonderful because it gives our student awardees a chance to share their research with such a broad, diverse audience. This year's award recipient is Mr. Min Kyu Ju, I was going to do that right, a PhD student in management at the C.T. Bauer College of Business at the University of Houston. His doctoral studies are focused on organizational behavior and human resources management, and he currently serves as a research assistant and teaching instructor. The award-winning research is titled Strategic Leadership of Female Middle Managers. How do female middle managers benefit the bottom line? The blind review process selected this paper because the strength of its research rigor, the design, the methodology, and the relevance of the topic being studied were so strong and stood apart from the other papers. We encourage you to come at 2:45 today and hear more about this research and contribute to our congratulations for Min Kyu, and help me in thanking him and congratulating him right now.
So let me again extend my congratulations to Min Kyu Yu and Nicole for your awards. It means a great deal, and we know that you're going to be standing up here soon. And a very special congratulations to Joanne Chula. Knowing you for many years, this is so well-deserving. And I would like, if we could all give another round of applause to Joanne, please. So now you're noticing that we're having 4 chairs come up here, and you think we may be having one person keynote. Carolina Giese was to be here, but as many of you know with your global travels, that sometimes travel plans change and also visas don't come through. And so we also learn to be adaptable. So with one problem comes opportunity, and I'm very excited to share with you that we're going to have a panel discussion that Mike Hardy is going to chair that is on democracy on the run. I think you will find it very engaging and informative, and with that I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
So we have a logistical nightmare here because I think this is a really good idea. It follows from our first plenary yesterday, Donna, who charged us to think about context, charged us to think about the unmediated, the unfiltered, charged us as well to think about the purpose of leadership and what's it all for. And when we were reflecting over the summer about whether we were taking the ILA conference to the edge of some of these issues, whether we were asking all the right questions that confronted us, that allowed us to share the dilemmas that we have, continue to have. So we thought we'd have a session, and we planned it, and I have an amazing group that we've assembled to do that. We plan to do it on Saturday at 9 o'clock in Ballroom A, and we'll still be there. But we have this opportunity to raise awareness of the issues that we want to share and discuss. And we'll have more time for interaction on Saturday morning for those of you who want to engage. It'll be your morning, not ours, on Saturday. It'll be your questions that will stimulate our further discussion. We've called it Democracy on the Run because we think this is one of the biggest challenges facing us. The way we organize ourselves, the way we participate, the way we engage in the formation of public policy seems to be challenged by many in many places. And we seem to be in a problem that we refer to in literature on populism, on the demise of democratic participation, the problems with political parties, the polarization, the tribalism, much is in the press at the moment. I have an amazing panel, and I said, and let me just tell you a little bit about them in the order that they're going to speak. We're not going to be too formal today. We're just going to run through because we're very pressed for time, and we have a lot to say. Mark Gerson, known to many of you I know, president of the Mediators Foundation and author of Leading Through Conflict. He's an academic. He's an ILA long-standing contributor, and is going to talk a lot about the current and contemporary state in North America. I'm delighted that we've managed to persuade Veronica Angel to come. Dr. Angel was a former advisor to the Foreign Service in Romania, is now a research fellow at the, I'm not going to do the German because my French is okay, but my German's so bad, at the Institute of Human Sciences in Vienna, and is working a lot on analyzing the emergence of new democracies in the East Central and Eastern Europe. And she's now an analyst with The Economist and a great authority on this. It's been a great joy to have had debate over the last couple of days, particularly. And my good colleague, Professor Kortrup, who is probably the world's leading, is the world's leading expert on referendum and on political process. He's a professor of political science at Coventry University, hugely significant areas of work that currently going on because of the interest in referendum and so forth. Also the biographer of Angela Merkel, which I'm sure he'll refer to. So let me set the scene. The scene is that we think that the democratic project is inherently unstable. When we get the result we want, we're joyous. And we say, what a wonderful world we live in. Everybody gets to participate. People power is mobilized for the best. When we get the result we don't like, we then get the dialogue in social media and in the general paper media and on television that, hang on, populism, the rule of the mob has run amok, and we don't like it. We need to look at that. And if it is the case that we're finding a challenge to the way in which we participate and engage one with another, that's quite serious. This isn't a new problem. So in the work that I've been doing recently, particularly in East Asia, where we're looking at participation processes and social capital, not a new problem. And I went back to look. In the 5th century, sitting around the coffee tables with Aristotle, democracy was argued to be patently absurd. The most shameless thing was the communication from Edmund Burke in his work on representation. Andrew Sullivan talking about the student protests, which some of us oldies were involved in the 60s, talked about how democracies end when they're too democratic. And finally, the United States founding father, John Adams, talked about his observation that there was never a democracy that didn't commit suicide. So they're the scenes that I wanted to set for you, the questions and the dilemmas, the issues that I think are very significant. When we talk about leadership for what? When we talk about a better world, when we talk about the way in which, as practitioners, as academics, as policymakers, we can contribute to this, we feel that this is a central concern. Mark,
How do you advance it?
with the big green one.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be with you, and I've got to tell you that preparing for this panel with my colleagues has been uplifting for me, because we're going to be talking about some challenging subjects both this morning and tomorrow at the workshop. But it's been uplifting because I've often felt alone and a little bit overwhelmed by the day's news. And being with these three colleagues and finding out about how democracies can go into crisis and survive, despite the quote from that Mike just showed, has been uplifting and inspiring for me. So I want to say that although we're going to talk about some tough things, I hope you experience this panel the same way I have, which is there's some hope there and there's light at the end of the tunnel. Now, 10 years ago, I started looking at the issue of conflict because I saw what was happening in the United States. And as a leadership development person for the United Nations, I'd experienced it in Africa and Asia, in countries where I'd been assigned. I felt that we were in a crisis because we didn't know how to deal with conflict. And when Harvard Business School Press asked me to write about conflict, I thought, okay, I'll see what I can do. But ILA played a pivotal role here, because I was around ILA and everybody was talking about leadership, authentic leadership, connective leadership, inspired leadership, leaderful communities. Everything was about leadership, and here I was supposed to write a book for Harvard Business School, and I thought, what's the bottom line when it comes to leadership? And I realized we don't agree on that. We really don't agree on that. That America is very divided about what it believes leaders are, and every segment of the population has its own leaders. And right now we're in a crisis because the dialogue is dominated by less than a quarter of the population on the left and the right. It's dominated, and the rest of the culture is feeling increasingly disengaged and exhausted and is actually looking for some other kind of leadership, something new. And I personally believe that ILA for 20 years has been developing what that is. So the message I'm going to end on in 5 minutes when I pass this to Veronica is that all of this incredible scholarship and research that we're doing needs to somehow turn into action. Because after 20 years of ILA, and to quote another author, after 100 years of psychotherapy, the world is not getting better. In many respects, it's even more challenged. So how do we translate some of the extraordinary work that we've just honored? How do we translate that into some form of action so that the A in ILA stands for International Leadership Action? So why do I say there's a leadership crisis? Because in America, and I'll just stick to America since that's my assignment, my colleagues are going to ably cover the rest of the world. You'll see that the percentage of Americans who want a third party has been going up, and the percentage of Americans who think who identify as Democrats or Republicans is going down. That's basically a culture saying we're giving two leadership products, and we don't like them. We don't like these leadership products. Can the leadership industry give us a new product, please? Can we get something else that we can get inspired by? Well, in the research that I did for the book 10 years ago, I said to myself, well, what's the leadership that really doesn't work? And so I studied the genocides of the 20th century. And I noticed that it didn't matter whether you were in Cambodia, Nazi Germany, United States during the period of colonization. You could pick your whatever genocide you wanted. There was a pattern. And the pattern was the pattern of demagoguery. There was also a pattern of what I would call the manager, somebody who kind of just sort of says, I'm not involved in that. I'm just going to run my business or run my city or run my town. And finally, there was a mediator, the person who said, hey, there's a growing divide here. How can we connect across that, to use Jean Lipton-Blumen's term? How can we bridge across that? Well, I felt those leadership choices were absolutely fundamental to what happened in countries. So I started looking at them in greater detail. And I want to look at them for just a minute with you here today. Because I feel that when a culture is in crisis and it chooses a demagogic or a managerial or a mediator approach, it's a pivotal choice. And I think we're at that time now, not only in the United States, but in many of the other countries that we're about to look at. So the demagogue, all you have to do is pick up today's paper to see this profile. And I wrote this and put this as chapter 1 of the book 12 years ago, long before we were in the current crisis, because I saw that this is an ever-present threat that cultures in crisis will turn to demagogic leaders. Now, the manager, while he or she may look good because they're not a demagogue, the manager can make a lot of progress. The manager can create productive businesses. The manager can make sure a department runs well. A manager can do a lot of great things for his or her own people, his or her own department or organization. But what I found was that cultures in crisis very much need the mediator, the connector, the bridger, which is why today and on Saturday, if you join us, I want to talk with you about how we learn. And this is why ILA, I believe, is so critical. How do we learn new skills as leaders that our culture isn't teaching us? Because a culture in crisis, I mean, pivotal choice here. Go to your college campus in America. There's a Democratic club and a Republican club. Well, thanks to the work of some of my younger colleagues, now on campuses across the country, there's also a Bridge USA club for people who don't want to join the Democratic or Republican Party and who don't want to turn their classmates into adversaries. So if you don't have a Bridge USA organization on your campus, find out about Bridge USA because it's growing rapidly, and I'm very proud of it. So let me conclude just by saying a word about what we'll go into more in depth on Saturday, that my feeling is we not only need a new kind of leadership, we need a new kind of citizenship. And for simplicity, I'm going to call it 2.0. And we need to go from a citizenship that says, I'm just going to confirm what I already know and go out there and argue on talk radio, to someone who realizes that learning is pivotal to their citizenship. We need to go from the idea of controlling the world around us and controlling the people around us to realizing that we're going to have to actually be in relationship, and that the day after an election, we need to be in relationship. We need to move from position taking to problem solving, where instead of saying, are you for or against this? Are you for or against that? We need to develop the style of leadership that really says, we have a problem to solve. We right now have different positions. How do we really solve this problem? And then to move into the political realm, we need to go from a leadership ethos that basically now has this country trapped in a perpetual campaign. It never leaves the campaign mode and never leads to governance. And I believe that the seeds for much of this is right here in LA and right here in the ILA, and I think it's also going to be in the presentations that you're about to hear. Thank you very much.
Good morning. This is my first ILA experience. I am very happy to be here. It has been quite uplifting, and this is not an easy thing for someone coming from Central and Eastern Europe. I have chosen as a title for this very brief presentation the idea of modern-day alchemy, post-communist state transformation and its constraints. And I have chosen this title not only because the laboratories of the 17th century were, of course, populated by European-centric, white male who knew everything about everything, including turning base metals into gold, but because the laboratories of post-communist transformation have also been marred by illusions and wishful thinking. And the elites that transformed the post-communist input actually took advantage of the whole situation and pretty much competed with the institutions that they imported from outside, and developed new networks of informal new networks that managed to take over the predictable outcomes of democratic institutions. Just as a brief overview of this area that we are covering, the countries in Eastern Europe, for you to have a feeling of them, they are pretty much Poland is something the size of California. Romania is briefly a sort of a Florida, and Hungary would be the size of New Jersey in terms of population. And the story of Central and Eastern Europe is a story of success, fragility, and diversity. You see the countries that have the little golden stars have managed to adopt the key institutions of market democracy and join the European Union. there are the other countries that are still unconvincingly knocking at the doors of the European Union, where Moldova, Ukraine, and Belarus. And of course, there's Russia, but that is a completely different story. Building markets and democracy simultaneously from scratch turned to be a mutually incompatible task. This is a very difficult thing. And I selected two case studies of this story of diversity, Hungary and Romania, because Hungary could be a representative of the front runners. Hungary was believed at the beginning of 1989 to have this sudden and beautiful transformation towards democracy, while Romania was expected to fall into a state of authoritarian rule and one-party domination. Fast forward 30 years, there's not much of a difference. And increasingly, research is showing that the transitional elites have managed indeed to compete in a different style of leadership, and primarily through these informal networks that were initially identified only in Central Asia, in the post-communist Central Asian states. So right now, the question is whether these countries are not slipping into this personalistic type of state building, and if they are, what would be the way of getting them back on track? So just as a brief conclusion, we have to really look in research at these clashes between the intrinsic effects of institutions and elite agency. And this is why I believe that the mission of the ILA is extremely important, and why the word international in your title is very important. And these are the critical junctures that lead to different outcomes of state building. The greatest danger right now for Central and Eastern Europe, and not only, but for other troubled democracies, is the fact that the institutions in this context of young democracies are very permissive to play with the law or suspend the dominating power of the law. And the checks and balances are there, and they have worked. In many interviews that I have conducted with the ministers of the first cabinets in post-communist Romania and abroad, they said that they were surprised by the effects of representative voting, which actually obligated them to negotiate with other parties. This was unexpected, building coalition, how to do that. But there is no reason to dramatize, although it may have sounded like that. We need to get the facts right and distinguish between our fears for the future and the expectations that are based on available empirical evidence. And Matt.
That's okay. We can turn Tina down, you noticed. A couple of years ago, I gave a talk here at the ILA, which was called The Britney Spears Theory of Politics. Some of you were there, and it was called Oops, I Did It Again, which is a common theme along these things. And I think, well, it's always good to have things. By the way, that was retweeted by Britney Spears, and then what do I need to say more? But we're not talking about Britney today, nor indeed are we talking much about Tina Turner, though I'd quite like to, and there might be certain references to her great work over the years. No, what I'm going to talk about today is also along the theme that my college touched upon, especially what Veronica was saying towards the end about the legal aspect, or the law aspect of this. And as I was thinking about this presentation, Tina Turner came to mind, because it's really all about the breakdown of democracy. It's not so much about whether we need another hero, do you get it? Or things like that. It's more, the question is, what's law got to do with it? And in most cases, people think the law, but that's a wonderful thing when we're dealing with any kind. We talk about the rule of law, and in Germany it's Rechtsstaat, and in France it's l'état de droit. And we always think the law is a wonderful thing that's sort of like, you know, as long as we've got rule of law, it's all good. Now, one of the interesting things, if we look at the empirical evidence, the historical evidence of breakdowns of democracy, is that the law is normally being used to subvert democracies and pluralism and all the other nice things that we have. When I went to law school, we had a professor there who would always, whenever you'd done presentations, would say, "You're talking about justice. This is the law." And Hugo Chavez, who's with the late Hugo Chavez from Venezuela, used to have a strapline which was called, "For my friends, everything. For my enemies, the law." So when we're talking about it, which is a pretty good one, and I will come with a couple of illustrations shortly about that. So basically, if you're running a dictatorship, and that goes back all the way to the Romans when Emperor Augustus, previously known as Octavian, took over, he didn't abolish the Senate. In fact, he appointed many more senators. He introduced secret voting and made sure that boxes had to be transported from other parts of Italy to Rome, and then they could, of course, slightly change the ballots as they came, but they didn't talk about that. Now, he was introducing many things that actually looked more democratic, but the historians at the time says, but gradually he took over all the functions, including the law. So you do it sort of subtly. You don't do it sort of one by one. So in a great sort of putsch or coup. So when we think about dictatorships, we think about sort of Pinochet, because we watched all those movies from the 70s, and the tanks are rolling in and they shoot the president. But that's basically not how democracies die. No, democracies die when people get power, when they get elected into power, and then they start using the powers that they've been given in elections, and they use them in a way which is not blind. So you lose legal procedure. So the typical thing you would do, and there might be examples here that might be familiar to you. So once you get elected, and you typically get elected by sort of using scapegoats, I actually have a couple of examples of this. Here we go. A couple of famous and infamous examples of people who get elected. Now, typically, if you get elected as a dictator, you need to have a slogan. It's always good to have scapegoats, but you need to have a slogan, and you need to get rid of people. There is this gentleman here, or gentleman is probably not quite the right word, actually. This individual, Benito Mussolini, got elected relatively fairly, actually, on a slogan of draining the swamp. Sounds a bit better in Italian, but draining the swamp was his slogan. And then once he got in, he started by selecting judges who were supportive of his point of view, who would then go on to make sure that people were selectively disenfranchised. And that's been a trick that's been used ever since, and possibly also to this day. We can also move on to other examples. I don't know if anybody here remembers Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda Marcos, as nodding there. You might remember her with all the shoes. She's got more shoes than I have, which is quite a lot. Anyway, and when Ferdinand Marcos also got elected, he had a slogan which was to make the Philippines great again. So it's... Stop, yeah, well, I don't... Yes. I mean, it sounds better, probably in Spanish, but which I wouldn't be. So make the Philippines great again and drain the swamp have been examples. I mean, I don't know why that's so funny. I mean, that's just the words they were using. So when he got in, Mr. Marcos, he didn't abolish democracy. There were still multi-party elections. It just so happened that he was winning. He would then take over, and that's the pattern that we've seen before. You would then select the judges. Once you've selected the judges, you have this majority in Parliament, you then make sure that they enforce the laws that you have introduced. You find out that maybe most of the owners of newspapers will have committed some sort of tax frauds. You then you sue them over that. You might find that they have been libeling politicians. You then sue them over that. Then they become bankrupt. You sell the newspapers to certain people. Those people who buy the newspapers happen to be more friendly to the dictatorship, and gradually, sort of little by little, death by 1,000 cuts, democracy then sort of slips away. and disappears altogether. Now, my colleague said that we shouldn't be panicky about this. I'm more a glass half empty kind of person, probably because that's just, it comes with age, by the way, and you become sort of grumpy. And when you're sort of a corduroy wearing academic, then you become even more grumpy. However, I think that things are really not good. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, close to 70% of all countries, according to Freedom House, were democracies. Now we've slipped to 45. So all these leaders will say to you that they need to get more powers, that we need to have a strong man, that we need another hero. However, ladies and gentlemen, we don't need another hero because, if I can quote Tina Turner once again, democracy is simply the best.
So I had the most amazing conversations, as you can hear. This is an unruly panel, which is driven by a passion for empiricism and for scholarship. So thank you very much for that. This is just a taster, and we didn't have long to craft the arguments and to lay everything out. But we did want to finish, if I may sit down, on a more positive. We have some ideas, we have some answers, we have some directions of travel that the ILA, in its resourcefulness, should take hold of in the way that Mark has said. We think education is important, and we're perhaps not pointing education always in the right direction. We think citizenship, as Mark has pointed out, needs to be unpacked and reconfigured, recalibrated for the contemporary age. And the work that I do currently as an academic is to look much more on trust and the role that trust plays. And it's come up many times in yesterday's conversations that I've certainly been in, and the importance that we have with trust. And this is a typical matter, typical model that we use in some of the work. The sort of 4 areas where we could take responsibilities as leadership scholars, as practitioners, as those who influence policy. Can we build a greater competence? Can we build a greater benevolence or kindness in those who lead us? Can we insist on making accountability, making people more of greater integrity? And can we be really critical when our leaders are not predictable? Predictability means that you respond to challenges in the same way, not in an ad hoc way, not in a way that disempowers. So I think there are things we can do, and we'll look forward to talking more about that on Saturday morning. 9 o'clock, Ballroom A. Thank you very much, and I thank you very much to my colleagues. And before I leave, I have some slight tokens of our appreciation for Veronica.
Thank you so
very
much.
much.
It's a puzzle piece.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Should we exit this way?
Yeah, that way.
Thank you, Mike.
My pleasure.
And Mark and Veronica and Matt, thank you very much for what I would call a teaser for tomorrow morning's session. And with that, we close our opening plenary. Please go and connect and relate with each other in the exhibit hall for coffee, and sessions begin at 10:30. Thank you.